Hello, it's Brother Sean again, and it's video 5, and it's Mrs. Doyle and Father Ted series. And this is about Mrs. Doyle at the convention. She's had an invitation to meet with some of the members of the Teo community of St. Francis, into spiritual Franciscans. And with her is Mary Kelly, one of the members of the community. And they're sat there listening, and then Sister Joy brings things to a close by inviting everybody to a beautiful meditation. And the meditation was so real. And Mrs. Doyle said to Mary Kelly, "Sure, Jesus, we don't have this on the west of Ireland. This is very new age, isn't it?" She said, "No," she said, "it's not new age. It's old age. It's coming of age, Mrs. Doyle." Oh. So anyway, Sister Joy asked them all to close their eyes and take a deep breath and call on the divine. And Mrs. Doyle's feeling a little bit uncomfortable because she's never done this before. She's been so busy parrot fashion her prayers, like a parrot, that she's never really had time to be still and think and listen and feel in her heart what it's saying to her. So this is an introduction to shutting her mouth and listening to her heart. And Mary said to her, "It'll do you no harm, Mrs. Doyle. It's great, it works wonders for me. When I'm stressed, I just shut up and sit up and do the business." And then during the meditation, Sister Joy just said, "Feel the peace of God. Speak to your heart." And then Mrs. Doyle said to Mary, "Something happened there to me," she said. "For the first time in my life, I actually heard a voice." "Did you, Mrs. Doyle? What was it saying?" "She was saying that you've come home to your heart, that you've been pretending and lying to yourself all these years, and that you're a natural member of the Teo community, that this is where you should be, because really deep down you love all God's children because you've been praying for them long enough." And Mrs. Doyle just quietly reflected and thought, that makes sense. But then another voice came up in her head and saying, "Sure, Mrs. Doyle, you're barking mad. You'll be excommunicated from the church." So she shared with Mary, and she said, "Mary," she said, "I don't know what to do. Me heart's telling me that I've come home. Me head's telling me I'm going to be excommunicated from the Catholic Church. The disgrace, the shame, Mary. I won't be able to hold me head high." She said, "Well, you can always come and live with me in Dublin." "Can I?" she said. So then Sister Joy came down and said hello to Mrs. Doyle. "Hello, Mrs. Doyle, how are you?" Mrs. Doyle said, "I've heard a lot about you from Mary." She said, "You're marvellous. You do that live stream ever so good with morning prayer. I haven't watched you," she said, "but I've got the link and I'm going to do it when we go home." "Well, I don't know how we can do it because we're not even on the internet, but I'll ask Father Ted if he'll invest in the internet, and then maybe I could join you on a Tuesday morning and a Friday morning for morning prayers." Sister Joy said that would be lovely. And then they had a group hug. And Mrs. Doyle went, "What's a group hug? We don't do them in the west of Ireland." "Well, we all come together and we hold one another and we thank God, we thank Mother Earth." "Well, sure, who's she?" "Our beloved Earth Mother Gaia." Oh my God, this is heavy stuff. So then she realised that of course we have an Earth Mother, and of course the animals have a place in God's kingdom. So she joined the circle and she felt really at peace, did Mrs. Doyle. And she didn't have to pull up her bloomers because the elastic was well worn. And she felt so at peace. The tears started running down her eyes. Because for the first time in 60 years, Mrs. Doyle was having an epiphany moment, or a hot flush. And Mary Kelly nudged her and said, "Are you all right, Mrs. Doyle?" She said, "This is lovely," she said. "I don't feel this when I go into the Catholic services. It's all very matter-of-fact and serious, and in Latin." So she said, "No, this is lovely stuff. They come from the heart, you know. And they're trying to embrace all faiths. But what they're trying to do, Mrs. Doyle, they're trying to see Christ in everybody. And it's not easy, because the church gives them hell, saying that it's New Age, it's Satan, it's this, and it's not. It's about love. It's about opening your heart to love, Mrs. Doyle." "Oh, Jesus, Mary," she said, "I could do with a bit of that. I'm so confused. And those priests, they've got me running ragged." "I'll go on," she said. So at the end, they sung this beautiful blessing to St. Francis. And Mrs. Doyle knew in her heart she'd come home. And it was worth risking her bladder, her pearls and her investment and small pension as a housekeeper to follow her heart. And Mary put her arms round her and said, "Mrs. Doyle, you'll be grand. It'll be tough for a few days when you go back, because we will miss you, pet. But you can always ring me." She said, "But we're not on the phone." "Well, you can write to me." She said, "I will." So what happened was, Mary gave her a big hug and told her to keep in touch. So Mrs. Doyle came up to Sister Joy and she said, "What do I do now, pet, if I want to join?" She said, "Oh, if you want to join, there's no rush. You have to take it easy and slowly and follow your heart, my child." "Really? But is there no preparation? Do I have to wear one of them habits?" She said, "Because I don't fancy having my hair cut off." "Oh no," she said. It's only himself that wears the habit." "Himself? Brother Sean? Because you know he was a Catholic monk." "Yes, I believe so. And he left. What a disgrace." "But no, Mrs. Doyle, it wasn't a disgrace. He had to find his feet, like you and me." "Oh yes, if you put it like that, I understand clearly now. But Sister Joy, what do I have to do?" "Well, the first thing you have to do is to just pray and stay in your heart and not listen to those feckin' voices in your head that's telling you that you're going to be excommunicated. And if you are, it's their loss. You're a beautiful child of God. And listen to me, Mrs. Doyle." And Mary's ears picked up. She said, "Listen to me, pet. Sure, if we all believe in the one God, then what does that make all the other faiths? Children of God," she said. "Well, what does that make you and me? Brothers and sisters," she said. "So where's the problem?" she said. "But there isn't one, is there? You've answered it for yourself, Mrs. Doyle. So try not to worry about being rejected, because you will. Sure, the traditional Franciscans don't want to know, because we're embracing interfaith. And the Pope in Rome, well, he's so anti-interfaith it's untrue. Sure, look what he did in Assisi. What did he do? Well, they had all the religious leaders from all around the world, and they came to pray. But sure, John Paul II, he was marvellous. Oh, I loved him. I've got a picture of him over my bed." "Have you?" "I do." Well, he brought them all together years ago, and he set up this interfaith centre. And the Franciscans looked after it, because Francis was interfaith. He wasn't. Oh, yes, he was. He embraced the Sultan. And he was a friend of Rumi. Sure, who the hell is Rumi? Oh, he was a great spiritual teacher, and Francis loved him. Get away. I should go on. Well, on that note, Mrs. Doyle felt so relieved that the Holy Father had opened up the Peace Centre in Assisi all those years ago. But then Sister Joy and the others happened to say, "But wasn't it a tragedy what he did?" Well, what did he do? Last year on the Feast of St. Francis, he told them all to go and pray on their own. Well, he never did the Slieveen. Sure, what's the point of having interfaith if you're not going to pray together? Quite, Mrs. Doyle. And on that, she hugged them, she got the bus, and was soon on the train, meandering her way back to Connemara.